In the desolate, wind-swept dunes of the planet Jakku, a small, isolated settlement stood against the unforgiving expanse of sand and silence. Poe Dameron, the Resistance's best pilot, had made his way to this forgotten place, drawn by the whispers of danger that had long since reached the ears of the Resistance. Something was stirring, something that could change everything. Poe approached the meeting spot cautiously, his instincts on high alert. The world around him seemed to hold its breath, the distant hum of the wind the only sound accompanying his footfalls. The settlement was barely a speck on Jakku's map, a place where most would be forgotten. He found Lor San Tekka waiting for him in the shadows of a tent, his figure outlined by the pale light of Jakku's twin moons. The old man's weathered face betrayed little, but Poe could sense a weight behind his eyes, something more than the usual grim resolve. Lor had been part of the rebellion, a trusted ally of General Leia Organa Solo, and a man who knew more than he ever let on. There was an unusual intensity in the air. Lor held out a small, inconspicuous data brick as Poe's heart skipped. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew it was important. "This came from Coruscant," Lor said, his voice rough, as if he'd been speaking too long, too many hours in isolation. "The First Order has occupied the former capital of the New Republic. They've declared war on the galaxy. They've learned from their mistakes, and they will be relentless." His gaze shifted to Poe's face, and he grabbed his forehead, as if the darkness beyond might swallow them whole at any moment. Poe took the data brick from him, his fingers brushing against the cool surface. He could feel the importance of it, the weight of the information it carried. A data brick containing secrets that the First Order would kill to recover. "How did you get this?" Poe asked. Lor had always had a network of allies. His affiliation with the Whills had served him and the rebellion well. "I have my ways," Lor replied, though the words sounded hollow in the night air. "It wasn't easy, and it's not over. The First Order has employed every possible means, every resource they have to retrieve it. They know someone has it, and they're getting closer. Their efforts to retrieve it tells us that whatever it is that is on that brick, they don't want anyone to have." "Why not give this to the New Republic?" Poe asked, mostly out of curiosity. Lor gazed past Poe as if visioning days gone by. "I trust Princess Leia wholeheartedly. Then there is her brother. What is coming upon the galaxy will not be won without the Jedi." Poe's brow furrowed. He knew the stakes, but something about Lor's tone made the situation feel even darker than it had before. The galaxy was already in turmoil, teetering on the brink of war. The First Order's unexpected invasion of Coruscant had been swift, ruthless, and devastating. Now, with this stolen information, the danger was reaching its boiling point. Before Poe could respond, a low rumble filled the air, an ominous sound that seemed to reverberate through the very ground beneath them. Poe's BB unit rushed in the tent, getting of a series of beeps. The faint hum of engines grew louder, and Poe's hand instinctively moved to his blaster. "They're already here," Lor whispered, his voice tight with urgency. "You need to leave. Now don't let them catch you." Poe hesitated, the gravity of the moment pulling at him. The data was invaluable, but he knew that in the blink of an eye, everything could go terribly wrong. But before he could make his decision, the unmistakable sound of troop carriers cutting through the night air shattered the silence. A dozen stormtroopers disembarked in rapid succession, their armor gleaming white under the twin moons, their blasters raised and ready. Lor's face hardened, a final, knowing look passing between him and Poe. "Go," he ordered, his voice steady despite the danger closing in. "Get the data to the Resistance. The galaxy depends on it." Poe didn't hesitate this time. He turned and sprinted for the safety of his ship, the darkness suddenly pressing in on all sides. His breath came faster, each footfall a drumbeat of inevitability. He didn't look back, though the sound of blaster fire, sharp, cruel, rang out behind him. Lor San Tekka had known this would happen. He had known the price of holding on to such dangerous information. The First Order's forces descended with brutal precision, their blasters cutting down anything that moved. Lor, despite his age and weariness, stood his ground, his gaze never one of shock as he walked among the carnage. He didn't run. He knew what was coming. Poe reached his X-Wing, his hands shaking as he quickly powered up the engines. Poe's X-Wing shuddered violently as multiple shots pounded into the hull, sparking and sending up plumes of smoke. The engine sputtered, its systems flashing red in warning. "No!" Poe shouted under his breath, his heart sinking as his X-Wing was reduced to a hulk of scorched metal. There was no chance of flying now. He barely had time to react before another wave of blaster fire rained down on the settlement. Without hesitation, he pulled the data brick from his jacket and handed it to his trusty BB unit. "Take it. Get out of here now. I'll come back for you," he ordered, his voice sharp with urgency. The droid beeped in affirmation, rolling away at top speed as Poe drew his blaster and sprinted toward the edge of the battle. The First Order stormtroopers were everywhere, overwhelming the small settlement, gunning down anyone who dared to resist. Poe's focus remained razor-sharp as he dashed past a series of debris, adrenaline fueling him. Suddenly, amidst the chaos, Poe saw him, Kylo Ren. The towering figure in black stood at the center of the battlefield, surrounded by stormtroopers. Lor San Tekka stood before him, hands bound, his face a mixture of defiance and weariness. Poe's blood ran cold. "Give it to me." Kylo Ren's voice was a low growl, his mask hiding the contempt in his eyes as he addressed the captive. "The data you've stolen. Hand it over." Lor San Tekka's voice, though strained, remained steady. "You and your First Order have brought nothing but malfeasance to the galaxy, occupying Coruscant, pushing the galaxy to the brink of another war. You think this will end well for you?" Kylo's eyes flared with a sudden surge of rage. "It won't end well for you," he spat, his grip tightening around his lightsaber. "Return what you have stolen, old man, or the consequences will be worse than you can imagine." Lor San Tekka stared at Kylo for a moment, his eyes unwavering. He seemed to recognize the lost soul behind the mask, a cruel mockery of what might have been. His voice was quiet, almost sorrowful when he spoke again. "Would your family be proud of you?" Lor asked, a sad note creeping into his words. Kylo's anger exploded in an instant. Without another word, his red lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss, its blade slicing through the air. The strike was swift and merciless. Lor San Tekka's body collapsed in a heap, his life extinguished in an instant. Poe's blood boiled at the sight. His grip tightened around his blaster, his finger hovering over the trigger. There was an opportunity here, a chance to end Kylo Ren's reign of terror before it could truly begin. Poe aimed, steadying his aim at Kylo's chest, and fired. The laser bolt shot through the air with deadly precision. But Kylo Ren was ready. Without even looking, his hand shot up, and Poe watched in horror as the bolt froze in midair, suspended by an unseen force. It hung there, pulsing with energy, before Kylo slowly turned his head towards Poe. The next moment, Poe felt an invisible force wrap around him, locking his entire body in place. His limbs were completely immobilized, as if an invisible hand had gripped him and held him there. He tried to fight against it, but his muscles refused to obey. He was trapped. Stormtroopers rushed forward, seizing Poe in their grasp and dragging him before Kylo Ren, who loomed over him like a shadow of death. Kylo's masked gaze bore into him, cold and calculating. "You are more than just a pilot." Kylo's voice was laced with dark curiosity. "There is something about you, something more interesting." He extended his hand, and Poe felt his mind being pulled, like a needle digging into the center of his thoughts. Images began to flash before him, moments from his past, fragments of his memories. Kylo's force power sliced through his mind with terrifying precision. Kylo's expression shifted as he gleaned the images. He frowned. "So you are part of the Resistance, a leader of their quaint fleet? Interesting. But there's more. I can feel it. More beneath the surface." He turned toward his stormtroopers. "Take him aboard the ship." As Poe was roughly hauled away, he noticed something strange. A lone stormtrooper standing apart from the rest, his helmet splattered with blood. Kylo's attention briefly flickered toward the trooper, an unreadable expression crossing his face. There was something in the soldier's stance that intrigued him, something off. Before he could dwell on it further, a sharp voice broke through the tension. Captain Phasma, a tall, stern woman dressed in a unique silver trooper uniform, stepped forward. She was calm, methodical, a seasoned veteran of war. "My lord," she said, addressing Kylo Ren with respect, though her eyes betrayed a hint of concern. "What should we do with the witnesses?" Kylo's gaze turned back toward the stormtroopers, his mood shifting in an instant. He stared at them for a long moment, as if weighing his options. His mask hid his expression, but his voice rang out, cold and merciless. "Kill them all." The command was simple, final. There was no hesitation, no mercy. As the stormtroopers moved in to carry out his orders, Kylo Ren turned back to the trooper with the blood-streaked helmet, his curiosity growing. Poe's vision blurred as he was pulled away, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something much darker was at play. And with every passing second, the galaxy moved ever closer to the edge of annihilation. The war was not just beginning, it was already here.